Hello, everyone. I'm Donna Fiducia.
And I'm Don Neuen, and this is Cowboy Logic Radio.
Cowboys didn't dance, didn't wear designer shirts, when their hearts were filled with memories, their bodies filled with hurt. They would sit around the campfire and exchange a piercing glaze. Back when the West was really wild, cowboys didn't dance.
And welcome to Cowboy Logic Radio, everyone. I'm Donna Fiducia.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Don Neuen. I'd like to be the first to welcome you to tonight's riveting Cowboy Logic Radio episode.
You don't sound like Don Neuen.
I don't feel like Don Neuen. Ladies and gentlemen, I've got a head and a chest cold. You're going to have to put up with me probably hacking like I've been smoking for 50 years.
That's what you sound like.
Last week I sounded more like John B. Wells. Now, I don't know who I sound like. But, the bottom line is this, ladies and gentlemen. We need to first take a moment and let everybody remember a few things. 16 years ago last night, or yesterday, I should say, was 9/11. And it saddens me to know how many people have forgotten that. Also, to have young people that don't really remember it or weren't even born when this happened. 9/11 is pretty profound to those of us that were around on that day. I don't know about you, Donna. Well, I know you do. We've talked about it many times. I know where I was.
I saw them. I saw them burning. That's where I was. And my son, who goes to school in New York City, sent me a picture yesterday, which I guess I'll post it. And it shows the lights where the World Trade Centers were juxtaposed to the new Freedom Tower, which to me doesn't hold a candle to the World Trade Centers. I know it's a pretty building, blah, 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 blah. But you know what? It's those two World Trade Centers in Lower Manhattan were just iconic. There's just no other way to say it. I flew traffic for many, many years in New York. I flew around them. We used to wave to people in the buildings when we'd go by. We really shouldn't have gone below the altitude of the World Trade Centers, but we did on numerous occasions, illegally, I might add, because early morning we used to fly alongside and go straight up the side of the building and wave to the people that were in there early in the morning. You could see the sun coming between those two towers. I have many pictures like that. I mean, it's just, I'll tell you, it's unfortunately with what's going on in the news today, and you really have to bring it up, I guess, up to the time of what was going on. And it kind of got put on the back burner with Irma and all the hurricanes that were going on, and rightly so. But it is always a real rough day for me. All
right, before we started into this, I said there were a few things that we needed to discuss, and I'm going to get back on track with that. 5 years ago, Benghazi happened. And I think it's very important that we not forget Benghazi.
Absolutely not.
For those of you that are aware of what was going on with Benghazi, and the embassy in Libya, it's tough. I mean, we've got friends that were part of this.
Well, Chris Tanto-Peranto, who we've met and we've talked to, he's been on a number of our shows on Talk America Radio, talkamericaradio.us, was on the Fox News channel yesterday talking about this, and he said, we're not letting it die. And I hope not. And thank God for his work, obviously, to continue with this. But somebody said to stand down, and the Secretary of State at the time was Hillary Clinton. And there's just so much wrong that points to this woman. And, she comes out with a book, what happened. I can tell you what happened. Donald Trump happened, among other things, but that's another story. It's just something we cannot forget.
Okay. As I said, there are a few things that I wanted to talk about.
Okay. That was another one.
Yep. 9/11, Benghazi, our friends and those that we don't know down in Florida, that have experienced the destruction of Hurricane Irma. We don't know what we can do. We feel helpless. I mean, Donna and I dealt with some of this aftermath up here in West Georgia. We had winds that were coming in maybe 40, 50 miles an hour.
We had to sweep water out of the barn. That was nothing
compared to, what's been going on down in Florida.
And Houston.
And Texas.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a downer right now.
It is.
With those four things, it's hard to be pumped up and bring you an entertaining radio show when we're dealing with remembering 16 years ago, remembering 5 years ago, dealing with what's going on in Texas and the colleagues and the friends that we've got that their lives have been turned upside down, and the same now with Florida, down into the Keys. I mean, it was destroyed.
Mm-hmm. And we're just seeing now.
And we just sit here and we feel helpless.
Yeah.
And we also need to sit around and now worry about the schmuck in North Korea. Mm-hmm. Because it's very real. And the only thing that I can say before we move into the regular part of this show is that there is no stronger people on planet Earth than Americans. And I believe now would be a very good time to show the rest of the world how strong Americans can be.
And I'm really proud of Donald Trump. He was at the Pentagon. Mike Pence went to Shanksville, Pennsylvania. And I started thinking, I don't ever remember Barack Obama doing much on 9/11. I mean, maybe he did, and I just paid no attention
I'm sure
to it.
That he did.
I normally watch the people reading off the names, and it takes hours and hours and hours. I just put it on in the background, and I listen, and I watch people. My kids at the time were in grammar school, and then we moved down to Colts Neck, New Jersey, Bruce Springsteen country, which is just a stone's throw off the Outer Bridge crossing. And they had kids who lost not one, but both parents in 9/11 that just left to go to work one day at the World Trade Centers and were never seen again. I mean, it's just horrible. It's just horrible, and it's not, I really feel that I have almost a PTSD, and a lot of people feel the same way I do when it comes to looking at those pictures of the burning buildings. I can't imagine what somebody who's been to Iraq and Afghanistan and has gone through and is still going through. And those are the heroes in my book. You folks are the heroes. The Benghazi, heroes to go through that. You just can't imagine. And this means war. I'm sorry, and I'm really glad we have Donald Trump when it comes to this. I know it's continuing. I wasn't real thrilled that we're still got, troops are going to now send to Afghanistan, but it is what it is. But I'm really happy we've got him at the helm when it comes to this lunatic in North Korea.
All right, we got about 15 or 16 minutes left in this segment, ladies and gentlemen, and we're done being on a downer.
Well, I got another downer.
Oh, good.
Lois Lerner. Trump's Justice Department lets Lois Lerner off the hook. What is going on with Jeff Sessions? Is he afraid? Or does Hillary have dirt on? I really think it is a house of cards. She starts to come down, it's going to bring down so many people. The Justice Department is not going to prosecute former IRS executive Lois Lerner for targeting conservative groups.
Not? What's the reason?
2012 elections.
Any reason given?
I don't know. Assistant Attorney General Kevin Boyd said that after a careful review of the case, the DOJ will not pursue charges against Lerner, who oversaw the IRS division that renewed tax-exempt organizations. After this process, the department determined that reopening the investigation would not be appropriate based on available evidence. He's full of crap. I'm sorry. This is probably the same guy that Rob Rosenstein came from. I'm sorry. I'm not liking... I love Jeff Sessions, but man, this Justice Department...
Some of what we're seeing we sure don't like.
No, exactly.
Ladies and gentlemen, I need to ask you an important question. I need to know if you find my loss of voice and raspy voice that I have right now to be sexy or appealing in any way.
I think it rivals John B. Wells.
No, John B. Wells is much lower.
Yes, he's in a class by himself, that's for sure.
But I have to tell you,
appealing.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have to tell you something. And that is, I have to brag on the beautiful Donna Fiducia a little bit, because every day she makes me this concoction that looks like, well, it kind of looks like urine.
I was just saying, it looks like a urine specimen.
Maybe somebody that's sick.
You drink it?
Well, I drink it. I do drink it. Now, why don't you share with the listeners what's in this? Because I'm drinking it right now. And again, if this was television, you'd be able to see this kind of a milky urine-colored liquid that I'm
It's apple cider vinegar. Okay, and apple cider vinegar is very tart, but it does...
But it's the organic kind.
Yes, it's
natural.
Totally
it's got
organic
hair on
kind.
It.
Bragg's apple cider vinegar. He's taking a swig right now as we speak. You got to shake it up because all the sediment gets on the bottom. And it does supposedly help you lose weight, or it helps keep your system in balance. But it's very tart, and a lot of people don't like that. So then I take a couple tablespoons of pure organic honey, made by the
Danny Hamilton at Star Cafe and Star Coaches in Atlanta.
He has his own honeybees. And so I put a couple tablespoons of that. But the tablespoons of honey will not dissolve well enough, so you got to put them in hot water.
Well, you
first.
put lemon in this too, don't you?
Not in yours, no.
Not in mine?
I put lemon in mine.
Why don't I get lemon?
Because I figured you got enough with the honey and the
Really?
apple cider vinegar.
Well, at what point did you take it upon yourself to determine what would be good for me?
Then it would just be sour again. I'm trying to sweeten the apple cider vinegar, but that's enough.
But I like Arnold Palmer's.
That's true. I could put a bit of
But anyway,
lemon in
so
there,
you
I
got to
guess.
shake it up.
And it's good for you.
And then it looks like a frothy glass of urine.
Cleans out your system.
But I got to tell you this, Donna, because ladies and gentlemen, I drink this on the way into work every morning before I start drinking my coffee.
Are you losing weight?
I just always sit around the same.
Okay.
And for those of you that care, someplace between 205 and 210. That's where I usually sit. This has not helped me lose any weight whatsoever. What it does is once I get to the office an hour and a half after I leave the house, I got to pee. I got to pee
Well,
bad.
that's good. It cleans you out.
Yeah, it makes you pee.
I bet if you
guess
stop
it's because
taking
it looks like urine.
But I bet if you stop taking it, you'd gain weight. I think it's keeping you level.
Maybe so. Well, at least we'll let her think
So anyhow, I love Judicial Watch. And this really, let's do a liberal insanity alert.
I bet Tom Fitton is having a fit.
Yes, he's
over
having
what's going
a fit
on.
about what's going on. But there is a liberal insanity alert. I can't talk. Will you stop drinking? Don't just pour it down your throat. Enjoy
Look,
it.
I was
It's good.
imbibing on the air.
Okay.
Is that the right word?
I don't know. But the
You don't know. You went to Seton Hall.
yeah, I don't remember. It's been too long. However, Donald Trump's approval rating has jumped like 15 points. Because I guess some liberals are actually looking at him going, or some leftists, I should say, Democrats, not even leftists, because the Democrat Party's been totally hijacked by progressives. But there are many conservative Democrats, common sense Democrats out there, the Kennedy Democrats, if you will, that might be looking at Donald Trump a little bit. Anyhow, Trump's approval rating popping for the time being. Now, John McCain, with what's going on with this sort of kicking the can down the road as far as the debt ceiling, because you really can't look at a debt ceiling, let's be serious, in light of what's happening with Houston and Hurricane Harvey and Hurricane Irma in Florida, okay? So now what happens is, I'm going to hold a grudge, and I don't care how much of the state of Arizona or the United States I screw up, because I'm going to hold a grudge because I'm a senile old fart that should have retired years ago, John McCain, has got to go to Trump now to ask for an increase in the military spending in a few months. Because John McCain has never seen a military increase he hasn't liked, instead of the other way around. This is I'll tell you, I don't know if Donald Trump is doing I think he's picking his battles. You know, he's probably saying, the DOJ, whatever, Lois Lerner. I don't know why Koskinen's still there, though. I mean, at least...
Yeah, that one's a puzzle.
Okay. Anyhow, so he's on TV all over the place. 2 trips to Houston. Florida and Hurricane Irma he's on top of. 9/11 anniversary, speech and appearances, and Vice President Pence in Shanksville, Pennsylvania as well. You got to admit, he's all over the place. Everybody says, he plays golf. He plays golf. He doesn't play golf. He owns golf courses. He might
that he goes to.
Yeah.
He just rides around in the cart.
I don't even see that.
Hey, Donna.
Hey, Don.
You know, I need to take a moment here and pay tribute to some people that were very influential in my radio career. And I think now's as good of a time to do this as any time. I would say right up at the top of the list, the number one individual that had huge influence when I was honing my skills in radio was Rick Leventhal.
Not me?
No, you've nurtured me along the whole way.
Okay, but I've anchored with Rick many, many times. He's wonderful.
He was not really in radio.
No.
Okay? But Rick Leventhal, if you're listening, I want to let you know that you had enormous impact on me. Those of you that are close to us that received a private video recently will know what I'm talking about. And those of you that have no idea what I'm talking about, if you will send an email to cowboylogicradio@gmail.com after I vet you and find out that you are not some kind of a left-wing troll, I will consider sending you a link to this private video so that you too can understand what I'm talking about. But guys like Dana Lewis and Rick Leventhal and William Longinez and who's the guy, Papal Mourner guy? Greg Palcott. Greg Palcott.
All these guys I've worked with.
Adam
Housley. He's there.
Yes. And Casey Stiegel. And then what's his name? The guy that looks like an unkempt bed.
The one that's always on Miami Beach.
And he's on the beach all the time, wearing shorts and flip-flops. I can't remember his name.
In the middle of a hurricane.
Oh, no, I can't remember his name. What is his name? Man, I'm having a hard time remembering what his name is.
Point being is,
Steve Ducey. No, Steve Ducey. What's the guy's name?
You should tell people. I can't remember either.
Donna.
You should tell people that you sort of did an amateur video as Irma was hitting West Georgia. Let's just.
Well, it was actually kind of the day before Irma hit West Georgia.
Funny, I got to admit.
But it's not for public viewing because, Phil Keating would probably be very angry with me.
Because he does look like an unmade bed. I never worked with Phil, but I did it. I should tell you something that's very funny. I forget what hurricane it was because Rick Leventhal and I anchored a lot of hurricane coverage overnight. And one day we had this woman who's, I don't know where, it was down in Florida. And it's like 1 o'clock in the morning. And she's got like this snorkel jacket because it was colder. And it's over her face. And you can't see her face. And the wind is blowing wickedly. I mean, street signs are going past her and everything. And finally, after basically being blown around, she says, well, I think we need to pull the mast down on the truck because the truck could tip over with the big mast sticking up. It's like those cranes, really, when you think about it. And she goes, but in the meantime, I'm going to go inside the truck and do one more report. And Rick's going, yeah, I think that's good that you do one more report. So she gets in the truck and she does one more report with us. And afterwards, Rick goes, well, I'm very glad that you're safe. And I looked at Rick and I said, no, you're not. You just wanted to see what she looked like.
Yeah,
because her
Rick,
whole
you
face
sly dog.
was covered the entire time until she did that last report.
Yeah,
that was
Rick.
pretty darn funny. He's a great guy, though. He really is. He's so fun.
On a serious note, though, I do owe the majority of my career to Rick Leventhal.
And Mike Tobin.
Always
yes. In the middle of any fray, be it Jerusalem or hurricanes here in the United States.
Mountain biking Mike.
Yeah, that's true. He's amazing.
He is amazing.
Fox has some just wonderful, wonderful reporters. Really.
And then they've got Peter Ducey. The hell is he?
He looks like
like a cartoon character.
He looks like a
and he sounds like a nerd.
If Imus were still on, he'd be calling him a pencil neck geek.
Yes.
Because that's pretty much what Imus used to call everybody that looked like that.
Yeah, but come on, Donna. I mean, you can't talk poorly of your former coworkers, but Peter Ducey?
He wasn't there when I was there. He was probably 15 years old when I was there.
Well, Dad was there.
Yeah, that's true.
Weatherman turned
Worked with
morning
Dad
anchor.
a few times. Worked with Dad many times, in fact, filling in on Fox and Friends. Hey, Judicial
then you got
Watch.
Kilmeade.
Yeah, that's true. Judicial Watch says it has zero confidence in the DOJ at this time, with an adequate review as far as not looking at Lois Lerner. It falls in line with allowing Mueller to continue to operate. And I'm just wondering who got to Jeff Sessions, but we'll see if Judicial Watch does anything. Judicial Watch is wonderful. You're going to contribute to anybody? That's the place you want to contribute. Texas voter ID law has been upheld. So you want to vote now, you got to show an ID.
What a novel idea.
Well, here's the point.
We got to do this. We have to do it.
But here's the point. They actually had to go to court, and they got people in court complaining and up, it was like an uprising in the court that, why do we need IDs to vote? And the thing is, what was ironic? In all these cases, you need a picture ID to get into the courthouse. So,
no, I've never had to have that.
I mean, this is ridiculous. To get into this particular room, you had to have a picture ID. You had to have ID.
Well,
I mean, that's just
where Donna and I vote in our little town in West Georgia. It's in the basement of a church. And when, first of all, We've been going in there almost a little over a decade, 12 years now. Mm-hmm. And they know us. And they still ask us there's only about 4 people in there. And they're all over the age of 90. And they still want to see, maybe they can't remember who I am. That's why they ask me for my ID.
No, they know. You just got to do
They're just doing it the right way.
So let me throw some more stats at you. The United States has 3.5 million more registered voters than live adults. Oh, boy, I hate when that happens. So
how does that happen?
That's the one thing that Donald Trump is doing, and he's right. Because you got illegals voting. That's the big thing. Hillary's new book, again, titled What Happened? I'm Going to Steal Something from the great Charles Ortel, who was looking into the Clinton Foundation, keeps finding more and more stuff. It's starting to get legs. I wonder how much longer it takes, because I guess the wheels of justice do move very slowly. But he came across a great title for Hillary's book besides What Happened. I tend to say expletives happened. But his title is It Takes a Pillage. I think that's great.
Charles is funny.
That's pretty much what the Clinton Foundation is doing. Hey, I have one thing. The Clinton Foundation, the new Obama foundations, the Gates Foundation, how much money are these people giving for hurricane relief here in the United States, for Houston and for Florida? What's Donald Trump up to now? 3 or 4 million alone?
Don't know, but I think that the Clintons blew the wad on Haiti.
Yeah, and that
there may not be any left over.
No.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen, we've got about a minute left before we go to break, and want to give our networks and our stations a big hat tip if I can get through this without coughing. Mm-hmm. Actually, let me cough.
He's got to cough.
Okay. Now, let me drink another
You really do sound
swig
terrible.
of this urine-colored beverage.
Hopefully it'll make your throat feel better.
All right, so here we go. Our digital flagship station is Talk America Radio, found at talkamericaradio.us and run by the fabulous Ron Phillips out of Dallas, Texas. And our terrestrial flagship station, which is basically an AM and FM radio station. That's what terrestrial means for all of those that are neophytes in the radio world. We've got WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM out of South Georgia. Scott James, Jack Ring, you guys are the best. And then we've got WJHC 107.5
Yep.
out of North Florida.
Jasper, Florida.
And then we've got in our own hometown, we've got WLBB 1330 AM and 106.3 FM under the guidance and tutelage of one Steve Graddick.
Tutelage?
You like that word?
Very good.
Yeah.
For a guy from Tennessee.
That's right. Steve Graddick, we appreciate you believing in us, buddy, and we sure do appreciate all the folks in Carroll County, South Georgia, and North Florida that pick us up on AM/FM radio stations. Back to you, Donna. We got a big show coming up.
Prayers for everyone again as we pass another 9/11 in New York City and Shanksville, Pennsylvania, and the Pentagon and all the United States. Prayers for Florida with Hurricane Irma victims heading up into Georgia, and prayers, of course, for our friends in Houston. Folks, we love you. You are the backbone. You are what makes America great again. We'll be talking to another great American, KCARL Smith, talking about the Frederick Douglass Republicans right after the break. And then at the top of the hour, Claire Lopez from the Center for Security Policy talking about EMPs, Sharia law, and the nuclear threats from Iran and North Korea. It's coming up next on Cowboy Logic Radio.
Cowboys didn't dance, didn't wear designer shirts. Their hearts were filled with memories, their bodies filled with hurt. They would sit around the campfire and exchange a piercing glance. a piercing blaze. Back when the West was really wild, cowboys didn't dance.
Check us out on the web at cowboylogic.us.
This is Denise Simon. 18 hours a day, I live in a world as an intelligence analyst. Intelligence analyst. Intelligence analyst. Intelligence analyst. Intelligence analyst. Intelligence. What I find is reprehensible. What I find is terrifying. What I find is treasonous. 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 The mainstream media has completely failed the American people. 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 Join me for the Denise Simon Experience every Thursday night at 9 p.m. Eastern.
This is Don Neuen, co-host of the Drive Time Sit Rep. Join me as I call in to my intel analyst, Denise Simon, for my daily situation report, or Sit Rep, the Drive Time Sit Rep. Check talkamericaradio.us for more information and show times.
Hi, this is Michelle Malkin from CRTV.com, and you're listening to Talk America Radio.
Hi, this is Tom Del Beccaro, author, lawyer, Forbes contributor, and former head of the California Republican Party. I'm also a former U.S. Senate candidate from the great state of California. And ladies and gentlemen, I feel compelled to tell you that Don Neuen, yes, Don Neuen, co-host of Cowboy Logic Radio, is my favorite talk radio show host on the planet Earth. Man, I cut that out without laughing.
Dude, look, read it. Just read it like I have it written.
Not Rush Limbaugh. Okay, Don, calm down. Not Rush Limbaugh, not Sean Hannity, not Mark Levin. I'm not saying not Laura Ingraham. What are you saying?
Read it like I have it written.
But Don Neuen. You can catch Don Neuen, the world's greatest, most talented, most well-articulated, most passionate, highly educated, and mind-stimulating talk show host on the entire surface of the earth every Tuesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern right here on Talk America Radio.
Excellent. Thanks, Tom.
Everybody, they're back on again.
Cowboys didn't dance, didn't wear designer shirts. When their hearts were filled with memories, bodies filled with hurt. They would sit around the campfire and exchange a piercing glaze. Back when the West was really wild, cowboys didn't dance.
Welcome back to Cowboy Logic Radio. I'm Donna Fiducia, along with Don Neuen, who's being very subdued.
I'm being very
He doesn't
subdued
feel
because
good.
I've got a mouthful of coldies.
Poor Bubby, he doesn't feel
But I do
good.
sound like John B. Wells.
That's
don't
true.
I?
That's one of the great side effects of
Of a head
seasonal
cold.
allergies.
Yeah. Hey, we've got a good friend. We've got a guy on here that we're going to be talking to, ladies and gentlemen. Before Donna introduces him, I want to tell you that of all of our guests that we have had over the past 5 years, this one gentleman had more impact on at least me personally than any of our other guests. And you're about to find out why. Donna?
We're talking about one KCARL Smith, who tries to wake people up with the message that Frederick Douglass had all those years ago. Frederick Douglass, we'll have Carl talk a little bit about who he is. You can find KCARL at libertymessengerusa.org. That's libertymessengerusa.org. But basically, KCARL Smith, your message is how freedom and how Frederick Douglass can trump racism, correct?
Oh, most definitely. I mean, when you talk about the whole idea of respect for the Constitution, the importance of understanding free and prosperous America, all these conservative values, you got to bring Douglass into that equation, that discussion, because not only did he live it, he wrote about it, and that's what helps us as conservatives to get our message across that we agree with Frederick Douglass.
Can you talk a little bit give a brief history, though, of who Frederick Douglass was?
Oh, just quickly, born in 1818 in the Eastern Shores area of Maryland. And the way I like to put it, Frederick Douglass, because he was born into slavery, he was born below poverty. Didn't own a pair of shoes till age 8 and sleep in the bed till age 10. Started his own homeschooling program to learn how to read and write because, it was against law to teach blacks how to read and write, teach slaves how to read and write. So he started his own program, how to read and write, started a reading ministry while I was a teenager on the plantation. And then kind of fast forward a little bit, he managed to escape from slavery at the age of 20 in 1838 on the second attempt. And then from that point, miraculous things happened in this man's life. A man with 0 days of formal schooling wrote 3 autobiographies. This man was an advisor to 5 U.S. presidents: Abraham Lincoln, Ulysses S. Grant, James Garfield, Rutherford Hayes, and Benjamin Harrison. And the big trivia question I always ask when I go speak, Don, is that, when Douglass passed away in 1895 at the age of 77, I asked people, how much money do you think Douglass had amassed in savings? And the answer is $300,000. But when you calculate the inflation over the years, $300,000 back then, well, in today's money, that's over $20 million. Wow. So a man who started his life as a sub-zero percenter, he was on a plantation as a slave, getting the slave master entitlements, that free stuff. I can make the argument he was a 47 percenter, but the story doesn't end there. Douglass ended his life as a 1 percenter. That's an amazing story, and his life is inspiring. But also, we'll get into it later. His writings are powerfully informative, and that's what gives us as conservatives the edge, so we can get our message across through the tongue of Frederick Douglass.
You ought to see the look in the eyes and the faces, KCARL, of people that I speak with or have a discussion with that are especially liberal, Democrat, black, and I'm talking all different types of people, white, liberals, blacks, whoever it might be. And we get into a political conversation, and I go, it might surprise you to know that I am not a Republican. My views are conservative, but I consider myself to be a Frederick Douglass Republican. And at that very moment, KCARL, I get the weird look in their face.
Yeah. That oxymoron, that phrase, Frederick Douglass Republican, is an oxymoron for many people. And when you make that utterance, they become curious and they want to know what you're talking about because you just created a mystery in their mind. And that's when we take control of the narrative, the drive the narrative, start changing hearts and minds when you have that type of dialogue, persuasiveness.
Yeah, it's an instant level of the playing field in a debate with somebody, especially if you've got some angry person that you're debating with. And because they don't know what to say. I did, Don. Yeah, here's something I did, Don and Donna, in terms of to be more effective with it. When somebody asked me, say, KCARL, are you a Republican? The way I responded. Now, what you said, Don, earlier, that's what I used to say. That's what I used to teach. But now I think I have it perfected where somebody asked me, say, KCARL, are you a Republican? I'm not just a Republican. I'm a Frederick Douglass Republican.
It trumps the race card, no pun intended, in either direction.
Yeah.
But
no pun intended. There you go.
It trumps the race card. Okay, give us the 4 values of Frederick Douglass that any respectable person, left, right, black, white, anywhere, should and would engage in a normal conversation, regardless of the lunacy that's going on now on the college campuses.
Yeah, these are the 4 core principles of Frederick Douglass. Now, there are several others. Let me give you the 4 that I'm going to tap into the others as well. Number 1 is respect for the U.S. Constitution. And that's going to blow a lot of folks' mind because a lot of people have been taught, like I was taught, that the Constitution is a racist document. We need to get rid of it. It has outlived its purpose. But no, that's not what Douglass said. So respect for the U.S. Constitution. Respect for life. There's no more to add to that. No respect for life, from the beginning to the end. The belief in a limited power of government. In other words, I would like to keep more of the money that I make. And so Douglas believed that government should be sized based upon the limitations within the Constitution. And the belief in personal responsibility. It really comes out of 2 Thessalonians. If a man doesn't work, he shouldn't eat. But there's some other core principles of Douglas that's important to understand that Douglas wrote about extensively. Number one, Douglas believed in free speech. He obviously believed in economic prosperity. He died a 1%er. Douglas believed in school choice. Matter of fact, Douglas said, doesn't matter if it's a private school or a public school, all of them should be excellent. And so these are the core values of Frederick Douglass that he embraced, that he wrote about extensively, that allow him to rise from a slave to a statesman and being born below poverty to prosperity.
But you know what, KCARL Smith, and again, folks, you can find him at libertymessengerusa.org. The message of Frederick Douglass, who again was born a slave and died with the equivalent of $20 million. KCARL, the problem really I'm seeing now is the breakdown of civil society. I mean, I'm watching the Fox Business Channel. I pretty much have that on most of the day. I don't even watch the news channels anymore. Just try to keep in touch of what's going on with business. Of course, they have a guy on from ESPN who's a former football player and now turned commentator. And they started talking about Colin Kaepernick and how now that the football season is starting again, people are taking knees or sitting for the anthem and everything else, and how is this having an effect on the NFL's ratings? And, oh, no, it has nothing to do with the NFL's ratings. Come on, give me a break. Anyhow, so the point being is this guy, who is, I'm sure, very well off, I can't remember his name, actually said, well, you know, they have a point, and I agree. They do have that freedom to protest. But this is what he said. You know, almost equating the NFL owners to slave owners. They're billionaires. Well, what are they giving the players for playing a kid's game? And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. And you wonder why nobody wants to watch anymore?
Yeah, to me, I don't recall who made the statement, but this is really a ridiculous statement because slaves had no option. Right. They were held against their will. You can elect to play, to take that career, play football or not. You have a choice. So there's no correlation at all. And because think about it. Poverty is not slavery, and these guys don't live in poverty.
No,
because slavery is below poverty.
Far from it. So, and even with even with head injuries, no one's holding a gun to your head to play this game. It's a game you love.
Right. I would be very curious, KCARL, on what you would think. And obviously, I'm asking you to speculate here. But what do you think Frederick Douglass, how would he feel about what these NFL players are doing, both black and white? Because there's some white guys doing this too. Yeah. What would Frederick Douglass's view be on this? Would he lean more toward the side of, you know, these guys have the freedom of speech? Or would he lean toward the side of going, man, there's a whole lot of people that gave their lives for that flag that you are protesting against?
You know, I gave that some heavy thought when the whole thing with Kaepernick came out. I went back and read some things that Douglas wrote. And my opinion is, Douglas probably leaned toward open up your mouth and speak justly for the injustice that exists. In other words, use your freedom of speech to bring to attention the injustice of black men, not in every case, but black men being shot by hands of police. And the reason why I say that, when you go back and read Frederick Douglass's famous what is the 4th of July to the Negro? And basically when you read the beginning of that speech, and I'm using my own interpretation of what I've read, Douglass's comments, They invited Douglas to come and speak. This is in a 4th of July event. And Douglas basically said, what are y'all take me for a joke? You asked me to come and speak to you about the 4th of July, but you know I represent 4 million blacks who are in slavery. So what to the slave is the name of the speech. What to the slave is your 4th of July? He said, y'all a bunch of hypocrites. We got this injustice going around. You're ignoring it. You want me to come here and speak and celebrate your 4th of July. So basically what Kaepernick did, in my opinion, he took a page out of Douglas's protest. Kaepernick said he saw some injustice going around, how blacks getting treated, and he made a stand. Oh, he knelt down, put it literally, against what he saw as an injustice to bring attention to it. And so what Douglas did, Douglas would spoke to bring attention to the injustice that exists with 4 million blacks being enslaved while people in New York celebrate the 4th of July. So he took a page out of that. Douglas said, your Constitution means nothing. Your flag means nothing. Your anthem means nothing if you have injustice that exists and we got 4 million blacks in slavery. So, in my opinion, what Kaepernick did, he took a page out of Douglas's way of agitating.
But my question is,
times have changed.
But can it be better directed, say, to Chicago, and the fact that there were 300 murders in Chicago by Father's Day of this year, and all of a sudden it's Donald Trump's fault? Every big failed city in this country is playing the race card.
Sure. Well, what Kaepernick did, Kaepernick addressed what he thought was important, that the whole situation about black men being what's happening to them, what happens to them at the hands of law enforcement officers. So that's what he was protesting. Not saying he would not be, and I can't speak for Kaepernick, but I'm sure he'll have some concerns about black on black crime too. But that was what he was particularly addressing.
I haven't heard him say anything about it, KCARL. And you know
he's put a lot of money.
Frederick Douglass had street cred when he was talking about this. Kaepernick, to me, doesn't have any street cred. He's not credible. And I'm not saying that the message he's trying to get out is not a valid message.
Right.
But Frederick Douglass had credibility when he stood in front of people and said, you've got 4 million blacks that are enslaved. Kaepernick doesn't. And you know, for a guy like me, that my family wasn't even in the United States during slavery. We came over at the early 1900s. You know, my family was busy being slaves in Ireland. And that's not to compare slavery from one country to another. But I take offense to Kaepernick pulling this kind of stuff because he doesn't have any street credibility with me in this area. And he's pointing fingers at and I've had fingers pointed at me about, white nationalist and white racism. And I've been labeled a racist. You know me. I'm the furthest thing from that.
Here's what's going on in the country. Everybody's talking about racism. It's over here or it's over there. But nobody's talking about let's solve the problem. One of the points I want to make is that if you want to understand how to solve the issue of racism, read Douglas's writings and read the relationship that Douglas had with Lincoln. Before Douglas and Lincoln met, Douglas did not like Lincoln, and Lincoln did not like Douglas, because Douglas thought Lincoln was a racist because of his comments, especially the comments he made with his debate with Stephen Douglas, because Lincoln believed and said publicly that blacks and whites could not coexist and that blacks were intellectually inferior to whites. And he viewed Douglas the same way before he met him. But so Douglas did not like Lincoln because he thought Lincoln was a racist, and Lincoln did not like Douglas. He thought Douglas was intellectually inferior. But what happened was they forgave each other. That's the first step. They had to forgive each other, these preconceived thoughts they had. Then they start talking to one another. Then once they start talking to one another, they realized they had a common foe. And the common foe was slavery.
Yep.
So that's what has to happen. And I'm going to be dating Ohio next week speaking. And one of the comments I'll make, because what the left is doing, they're painting conservatives, they're painting Donald Trump as racist. Anybody that voted for Donald Trump is a racist. If you're black, you voted for him, you don't get home. But here's something that's important that I'm going to share with them. What I got from reading Douglas did not care if Lincoln was a racist or not. He said, I can't change his soul. That's not my job. But I can agitate him to get him to change his legislation.
Exactly. So let me ask you this, though. Going forward, how do we take somebody, just like tearing down these monuments, Why do we judge what's going on using today's standards and given, something, 150 years ago? Lincoln was a racist. Okay. He had racist views, but then again, he, and as you just said, and Frederick Douglass had the same views on slavery. There's something to be said about that. I believe I grew up I was a little young in the 60s, but old enough to remember what was going on. I believe there's serious things that needed to be addressed during the 60s and the civil rights movement. Absolutely. And now you've got the United States of America that got rid of slavery and elected a black president twice. Mm-hmm. I don't see any other countries making strides like that, especially in Africa. I mean, look at South Africa right now. It's quite the opposite. And to me, that is the biggest hypocrisy of all, because the United States is righting the wrong. And now all of a sudden, because I guess we didn't put Hillary in there and another woman, we're racist again. Because what it boils down to in the bigger picture is the left has no message. And when you get in arguments with the left on a one-on-one basis, and if you argue with fact, it eventually kind of digresses into, well, you're racist, you're homophobe, and blah, 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 blah. And on a bigger scale, I think that's exactly what's happening with the country, which is scary to me.
I think also what's happening is that the left, they are diabolical, okay? And based on my personal experience of dealing with some of them. And what they're doing, they're setting the stage up now for the next election. So they got to keep race at a fever pitch to keep the masses of the people distracted. So this whole thing about racism, it's a attractive distraction. It's keeping people's attention on that while something else is going on. For example, these monuments. The monuments, I'm here in Alabama. The monuments, they want to take down all these Confederate generals, the Confederate military. But the Confederates were Democrats.
Yeah. So
it was the Democrat, and it's the Democrat Party and the left who want to take down their memorabilia. Why is that? In my opinion, they want to sanitize history. They want to remove from the public scene anything that they were racist and going to the Democrat Party.
Well, that's a classic Marxist move too, and classic, quite frankly,
Nazi move.
Is Islamist move and Nazi move exactly. So they're doing what they're saying the right is. They're calling the right Nazis.
But that is the tactic of the left.
Exactly.
Matter of fact, that's why they're doing all of this. They want to move all these Robert E. Lee. Well, how come they're not taking down anything regarding Woodrow Wilson?
Well, look at Margaret Sanger. Her bust is still
or Lyndon B. Johnson.
Exactly. And the fact that Hillary Clinton...
And why is it...
Oh, go ahead.
Hey, Donna, why isn't it on the Democrat Party's website, and it's still up there, on their website, on the Democrat Party, our history page, the first 14 words read, for more than 200 years, we have led the fight for civil rights. That's on their website. That's I'm quoting it verbatim.
It actually sounds like something Maxine Waters might say.
Well, look at Robert Byrd, a grand wizard of the KKK. How many decades was he a Democrat senator? And Hillary Clinton just said, he was her mentor and everything else. Right. I think she gave her the eulogy at his funeral. I mean, it's unbelievable how the left...
The thing.
Yeah.
If you don't know the truth, you can never recognize a lie. So to me, with the Confederate flag should not be flying. That's my opinion on that, because you lost the war, and normally when you lose the war, the side that loses the war don't get a chance to fly that flag. Take it down.
I agree.
And make it an archive. Now, when it comes to these busts and statues of these generals and all this stuff, my personal opinion is leave it up there, because now I got a place to go to show my African-American children, grandchildren. You see that general here? He led the Confederate Army to try to keep you in slavery. I get a chance to teach that because they don't teach it in school.
That's
so
the thing.
If you don't know that history,
I think Lincoln has one paragraph in history books nowadays. My friends on the left their attitude is, well, you can read the history books. I said, no, you can't. Just like you just said, it's not in the history books anymore.
Somebody sent me a picture. Maybe it was a documentary I saw where the Democrat Party headquarters, they have a portrait of Abraham Lincoln in the Democrat Party headquarters. And also, I saw a picture. It was a picture of a donkey, and on the donkey had the images of 4 African Americans: Frederick Douglass, Martin Luther King, Thurgood Marshall. I think it was Harriet Tubman. That's a lie, because Frederick Douglass was a self-proclaimed Republican, and Dr. King was not a Republican or a Democrat. He said he was an independent. He stayed neutral.
Yeah.
So that's how they control the narrative. And where we got to get it back, we got to incorporate Douglas's writings into our message, because Douglas' writings it tears down the false rhetoric of the left and every effort to rewrite history. But also, when Douglas writes about the importance of the U.S. Constitution, education, free market principles, a free society, and the free speech, it defeats all of the propaganda and the narratives of the left. And you do it through a guy, Frederick Douglass, who was not a racist, but he was a victim of racism. And that's what the left don't have an answer for.
Absolutely. KCARL Smith, unfortunately, we're out of time. It always goes way too fast. Yeah. But, folks, teachings of Frederick Douglass can absolutely trump the race card. And I actually should say that without being ironic. Respect for the Constitution, respect for life, limited powers of government, keep most of the money you make, and personal responsibility. You just can't argue with that. And if you go to KCARL's website, again, libertymessengerusa.org, libertymessengerusa.org. And pretty soon, KCARL, you're going to have an online course teaching about Frederick Douglass up there as well?
It's the course is online, but I get so many people sign up for the course, and what I try to do, I try to coach people personally in the course. So I close it down for this period, and I reopen registration about another week. So
okay.
if you go to diversityengagement.org, go ahead and join the list, and then when we open registration back up, you have an opportunity to do so. So you can get coached personally by KCARL.
And just doesn't come any better than that. Okay, diversityengagement.org. and libertymessengerusa.org. KCARL Smith of the Frederick Douglass Republicans, we thank you so much for joining us here on Cowboy Logic Radio, as usual, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you, Don. Appreciate it. Don, get better.
Thank you, brother.
And coming up next, we'll be talking to CLARE Lopez about, national security and the electromagnetic pulse, an EMP. It's coming up next on Cowboy Logic Radio.
Cowboys didn't dance, didn't wear designer shirts. Their hearts were filled with memories, their bodies filled with hurt. They would sit around the campfire and exchange a piercing glance. Back when the West was really wild, cowboys didn't dance, yes. When cowboys didn't dance, didn't wear designer shirts. When their hearts were filled with memories, their bodies filled with hurt. They would sit around the campfire and exchange a piercing glance, yes. Back when the West was really wild, cowboys didn't dance.
Check us out on the web at cowboylogic.us.
Hello, everyone. I'm Donna Fiducia.
And I'm Don Neuen, and this is Cowboy Logic Radio.
Cowboys didn't dance, didn't wear designer shirts. When their hearts were filled with memories, their bodies filled with hurt. They would sit around the campfire and exchange a piercing glance, yes. Back when the West was really wild, cowboys didn't dance.
Welcome back to Cowboy Logic Radio. I'm Donna Fiducia, along with Don Neuen.
Who is going to behave this segment?
You have to, because you have no voice, too.
That's true. I'm losing my voice, but I've also got... We are joined by someone that I consider to be phenomenal.
Well, yeah, and been a while.
And whenever we have people like that on, I behave.
It takes a lot for you to behave, but for someone like Claire
Lopez makes me behave.
You behave. And if your voice gets any lower.
I'm going to sound like John B.
You
Wells.
will. You'll sound like John B. Wells, which is really cool.
There you go. All right, go for it, Donna.
Claire Lopez joins us again, folks. You know her at the Center for Security Policy. If there's anything you want to know about anything really deep, Claire's the person to know. She formerly was a career operations officer with the CIA, a professor at the Center for Counterintelligence and Security Studies, executive director of the Iran Policy Committee from 2005 to 2006, served as a consultant, intelligence analyst, and researcher for a variety of defense firms, and she was named a Lincoln Fellow at the Claremont Institute in 2011, co-author of 2 published books on Iran, author of the acclaimed paper for the Center, The Rise of the Iran Lobby, and co-author editor of the Center's Team B2 study, Sharia, the Threat to America. That one pretty much says it all. Claire Lopez, welcome back to Cowboy Logic Radio.
Thank you very much. Really glad to be back with you both.
We should also add taking Farsi lessons on top of all that other stuff that she's... So you can really know what's going on as far as the Middle East.
Let's just put it this way. If I could be anybody that I'm not, it would be Claire Lopez.
This is true because she knows
and Claire,
so much about
you know
so
me
much.
well enough that sounds like some kind of a funny comment, but you know darn well that I'm being serious.
Well, I appreciate that, but you haven't sat through a Farsi class yet, so you might want to think twice.
Yeah.
Well, I just heard that you had to stretch before you go to them.
I'm really actually missing a whole lot of my classes, so I'm not that good of a student.
She's playing hooky.
Oh, man. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, I just want to share something with you before we get into the meat of this interview, because this interview is going to scare you. It's going to put you on a downer somewhat. It's creepy. Not that Claire is creepy, but what Claire knows and is going to divulge is creepy. But there is a little bit of a sun ray in this dark cloud. And that is that I stumped Claire Lopez prior to us going on the air here. And I'm not going to necessarily share with you what I stumped her with, but it does have to do with chickens.
Has nothing to do with Farsi classes
or
and Sharia law or EMPs.
But I did stump the Claire Lopez with a chicken comment. Yes. And we might share that in the next segment if you guys hang around.
Are you done?
I'm done.
Okay.
I'm done. Hey, actually, no, I'm not done.
Talk about the Wall Street Journal report, because it's been a while, Claire, since we've had you on. It's been probably 2 or 3 years that we've been talking to you about the threat of an EMP, wondering why Congress doesn't get off their duff and do something about it. And finally, as Don's going to bring up, the Wall Street Journal is waking up.
Yeah, we've been talking about this for a long time. The circle of friends that we run around in that, quite frankly, we have yet to figure out why we're running around with this level people. But there's people like Claire Lopez and Major General Paul Vallely and Lieutenant General Tom McInerney and Lieutenant Colonel Bill Cowan and Dr. Peter Vincent Pry and Frank Gaffney and all these brilliant people Donna and I seem to know pretty well. And for years, we have been talking about EMP and the threat from an electromagnetic pulse, both from a solar origin, but also from that of a nuclear detonated device. And it is very real, and many people, when you sit around and talk with them about this, look at you like you have 14 heads, that you're wearing some kind of a tinfoil hat, that you're freaking out for no reason, when the reality of it is, at least in our opinion, Claire, you may agree with us, Dr. Peter Vincent Pry did, it is the single greatest threat to the people of the United States, and for that matter, in the case of a solar EMP, potentially the world. It is the greatest threat, and we have been talking about this and talking about this and talking about this. Well, 2 Saturdays ago, the Wall Street Journal finally decided to get on the same page, and they start talking about it, and I had a very sick feeling in my stomach, because at one point I'm going, oh man, this is this is going to happen.
It's
and
like
then
the boy who cried wolf.
I went, wow, I feel kind of vindicated. So it was a real conflicting feeling, Claire. And if you don't mind, let's talk about EMPs.
Electromagnetic pulse. Can you explain what it is, Claire? And my second part of the question is, how many times does North Korea have to be like the boy who cried wolf? How many times do they have to say something before something could happen, and why should we take that chance?
Right. Well, an EMP is an electromagnetic pulse, and just as Don just said, it can be generated either by the sun, which does it all the time in the form of solar flares, or a really big one would be a coronal mass ejection. But because space is so big, and we are on Earth at some distance from the sun, it's not often that we get hit broadside on by one of these. But one of these from the sun did hit the Earth broadside on back in 1859. And that was, of course, before the world was electrified. That is, that we all depend on electric power for everything. But there were telegraphs, and the Atlantic cable had just been laid. And as a British scientist who later gave his name to the event, now called the Carrington event, after the British scientist, what he said, what he noticed and what he realized was that the solar flare of that year, 1859, resulted in telegraph poles being set on fire spontaneously, bursting into flames. And the Atlantic cable I just mentioned was destroyed. Under the Atlantic Ocean, that far down, it was destroyed by the solar flare and the electromagnetic pulse effect that it gave off. So think now in a world, and especially the United States, where everything we do depends on electric power. The delivery of food and water and fuel, financial services, medical services, communication, all of that depends on electricity. And if a solar flare, or the other way that this can be done, of course, is a nuclear bomb detonated in the high atmosphere, and it gives off a stream of gamma rays, which courses down through the atmosphere and strikes our electric grid in the same way that a brought-on solar flare would do. Our civilian electric grid, as Don alluded to, is unprotected. It's not secured against either a sun event or an enemy attack by EMP. And this brings us then, of course, to North Korea and recent tests and threats.
Claire, we are probably the only advanced country, or let me rephrase this. We are most definitely the most advanced country on the planet, and we are unprotected against an EMP attack, both solar and nuclear. If I'm not mistaken, and you'll be the one to be able to correct me on this, Iran has protected their grid, Russia has protected their grid, China has protected their grid, and even North Korea is either somewhat or protected. Am I correct?
North Korea has no grid.
I think that's the truth of it, Donna.
But are these other countries that, quite frankly, are considered our enemies, their grids are protected at least to a certain degree, correct?
I have to admit I'm not familiar with the extent of the protection of all these other places. I really don't know. I've focused most on our grid, and I know for a fact that ours is not protected. And the problem with that, of course, as I said, is that everything we do in modern life now here in America depends on electric power. We have what's called a just-in-time delivery system, which means the stocks of food and fuel and water and so forth are timed, computerized to be delivered just in time for the expected, need. Well, that means that if that were interrupted, we'd run out of this stuff really quickly. And Congress has done multiple studies about the effects of an EMP hitting America over the years. And these studies by Congress show that were an EMP to hit and our electric grid were to go down, which is what it would do, a cascading failure that takes down the entire grid and it stays down. It doesn't come back up because we don't have the equipment, and we don't have the great big substations and all of these transformers are produced elsewhere, like South Korea and Germany.
Right.
So we wouldn't have that. Congress's studies over the years have shown that were that to happen, in 1 year, 9 out of 10 Americans would be dead of starvation and lack of medical care and the collapse of civil society that would be attendant to the loss of electricity.
Well, just look at these two horrific hurricanes and storms that hit Texas and Florida in the last week or two. I mean, that alone is nuts. I mean, we're talking to our good friend Denise Simon, whose husband works at a Lowe's. And, I mean, there's a run on wood to batten down the hatches and water. And these, like you just said, Claire, shelves on the stores, because they just have maybe enough for a week to 2 weeks tops, would be barren in a small period of time. You'd really get to a point where, I hate to say it, survival of the fittest.
Well, it's exactly what it would be, Donna,
will disappear.
Because all of the, these two catastrophic events that have taken place in the past few weeks, Hurricane Irma, named after my wonderful grandmother, and Hurricane Harvey out of Texas. You've got people that are going into these disaster areas from safe havens. Ron Phillips goes down there from Dallas. He can always go back home, and he's got electricity. He's got heat and air and fuel. The problem is this grid goes down, and just like Claire said, it's a domino effect. Once one substation goes, it's going to be a domino effect, and they're going to put the stress on the other substations, and they're all going.
It's a cascading
failure. And there will be no safe haven, right, Claire?
That is it. That's what would happen if we got hit broadside by a solar flare, or if a nuclear EMP were to be detonated over the top above continental United States.
And this is what North Korea is doing. These ballistic missiles that they have.
And Iran. I think Iran would like nothing more than do this.
And that's the thing. You have these rogue nations, whereas before, when it was just the United States, Russia, and China, there's not going to be any mutually assured destruction because these three countries at least have some wits about them. But when you bring in Iran and North Korea, where these lunatics are, and the Muslim extremists in Iran want nothing but to kill the little and the great Satan, being Israel and the United States, it's really scary. There's a Congressman McCall, correct? I believe it's McCall who's in charge of getting this EMP legislation through, Claire?
Well,
is he still in charge?
Chairman Mike McCall is the chairman of the House of Representatives Committee on Homeland Security. And by the way, he apparently is under consideration, the media says, to be appointed the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security. But for the moment, he's in Congress, right? And there is this piece of legislation before his committee, the Committee on Homeland Security, House of Representatives, the SHIELD Act, which would mandate the protection of the United States civilian electric grid. That piece of legislation has been stuck in Congress for, I've lost track of how many years, upwards of 6 or 7. So this is not a Republican thing. It's not a Democratic thing. It's both. And the reason is the power of the utilities and power industries, which do not want to go to the trouble. Obviously, they would pass the expense on to the customers, so it's not like they're going to have to eat the cost of it. But they don't want to deal with it. They just don't want the hassle, and they have been lobbying for all these years to hold up this legislation that would otherwise mandate the protections be put in place.
All right, Claire, in our past conversations with a gentleman that I know that you know well, Dr. Peter Vincent Pry.
Yes, brilliant.
Yep.
On this subject in particular.
He has made it very clear that there are basically two levels financially that are out there to protect the grid of the United States. One is kind of a bare bones situation where if we get hit, we will be able to recover quickly, and that would cost $2 billion. Billion with a B. Then we could protect the entire grid of the United States at military spec levels if we would spend only, and I'm not being funny when I say only, $20 billion. We would have our grid protected at military spec levels, meaning nothing's going to happen. Nothing's going to bring this down in the form of an electromagnetic pulse. Now, $20 billion to people like the three of us and our listeners is a heck of a lot of money. But $20 billion is a drop in the bucket for the federal government to invest in the infrastructure of the United States. Let's just think about the $150 billion worth of frozen assets that we had from Iran that we just recently gave back to them so they could finance terror organizations and activities. You know, we could have very easily grabbed $20 billion of that money if we were so intent on giving it back and said, you know what, we're going to penalize you $20 billion. Here's $130 billion you can take back and finance all your terror organizations with. We're going to keep this $20 billion and kind of protect our own backside in the event that you decide to come after us. But no, that didn't happen. But $20 billion, am I correct, Claire?
If Dr. Peter Price said it, it's correct. And you know, just as you say, that sounds like a lot of money to the ordinary American, and it certainly is. But in terms of the federal budget, the Pentagon, let's say that's weekend pocket change for the Pentagon. It boggles the mind that such a reasonable expense in the broader scope of things it cannot be expended to protect the United States. If we get hit with an EMP, either by the sun or by an enemy, that's the end of America. That's it. We're done. We're finished. There is no more America. I mean, it just the risk of the catastrophic end of America as we know it situation compared to the amount of money that would secure us against that just doesn't seem reasonable not to do it 10, 15, 20 years ago.
Exactly. And the thing is, when you think about it, we just gave $8 billion at the drop of a hat, and that's just the start for Harvey relief for Houston, and rightly so. But there's so much that the government has as far as waste. It's not funny. And by the way, with the SHIELD Act, I was going to say, Claire, when we first had you on probably 3 or 4 years ago, at that point you had said that Mike McCall could easily go forward with it. And it's very distressing to hear that it was probably more like 7 years ago when this started, and still nothing has happened. I mean, even think about someone like a medical emergency. Tucker Carlson suddenly got an appendix attack. You'd be dead. You'd be absolutely dead with something like that if you're in the middle of an EMP.
Well, people on dialysis, they're done.
Yep.
All of that.
I mean,
we would be back to a time in our history before electricity made modern life and modern survival rates possible. We would be back to a time when, you know, the average life expectancy was something south of 40 years. People died of ordinary infections and what we think of now as common emergencies like an appendicitis. Yeah, you're right. There would be no help for that. No electricity, no surgery, none of the modern medicine that we rely on so much. Never mind just ordinary food deliveries, water deliveries, gasoline and fuel. We wouldn't have it.
Well, and the thing is, there's so many people, and this is going to sound like I'm making a joke of this, Claire, but I'm not. There are so many people that actually think that what you go and buy in the grocery store is grown on the aisles in the grocery store.
Did you see?
Okay.
There was.
They have no idea. Can you expand a little bit on what you would consider the level of civil unrest in cities such as Baltimore, Maryland, Atlanta, Georgia, Chicago, New York City, Philadelphia, Memphis, Tennessee, Detroit, Los Angeles, Houston, Texas? What kind of civil unrest do you anticipate in the event of a nuclear, which my understanding after having these conversations with Dr. Pry, nuclear is the one that would end up wiping out absolutely everything, because those gamma rays that are coming out of there are about a foot long, where the solar EMP rays and particles are more like about 3 to 4 feet long. So they're going to have more trouble penetrating certain things like your home computer and things like that.
Right. Well, the point you're making, though, is really a frightening one and a valid one, and that is that in our modern society here in the United States, and, well, really many places around the world, we're urbanized. Most of us do not live in rural areas or on farms or have access to how food is really grown or how our domestic animals for consumption are actually raised. Most people in this country have no idea about any of that. Who knows how to milk a cow? Who knows how to even, raise chickens? We were just talking about. Urbanized populations don't know that. They go to the local supermarket, and your chicken is shrink wrapped in a nice little container in the freezer section. They have no idea. So it really is a smaller and smaller percentage of our population every year. I mean, because of mechanization and advances in agricultural methods and so forth, that a fewer number of people can raise really more and more food every year. But what that means is that the vast majority of Americans are divorced from the land. Yeah. We're living in apartments or suburban, subdivisions, and so the supermarkets would be stripped clean immediately. The gas stations would run out of fuel. I mean, look at Florida right now, and they're doing everything possible to get fuel into that state, with the rest of the country still functioning perfectly well, and Florida is still having trouble with, obtaining enough fuel so that those under evacuation orders can leave. Now think of the entire country just scavenging the gas stations and every place that sells food out. It'll be gone, and then what? And then there'll be a scramble for whoever has anything, meaning in your homes or stockpiled or whatever. And then there'll be a mass exodus out to the farmlands, out to the rural areas where they think maybe there would be food. And then that'll be all picked clean.
And that's when those of us that live in the country with 1,000-yard line of sight will be waiting for them.
We have guns. Thank God for the Second Amendment.
And I know that I said that somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but I'm serious,
true.
Claire.
I mean, that is how things would devolve. It really is how things would devolve. There would be absolute chaos and conflict over whatever resources remain, but those resources would be very quickly used up. There wouldn't be any more.
Everyone becomes a target at that point. Everyone becomes a target.
And I hate to say it.
Yeah, we got to go to break.
We're going into a break in a minute, but to me though, the D.C. insiders are all protected. They think it's not going to affect them. They think they're totally insulated, and they're not. If 90% of us are going to die, a lot of them are going to come from the D.C. Beltway as well. Claire, we have to go to a break now. When we come back, I want to talk about how we're overdue for a solar flare, since, again, the Carrington event was back in 1859. That is a no-brainer. So the SHIELD Act should be put in place. But I also want to get into the Iran lobby, the Muslim Brotherhood, and things of that nature, because you're so well versed in that. So much to talk about with Claire Lopez. We'll come back with more right after this on Cowboy Logic Radio.
Cowboys didn't dance, didn't wear designer shirts. Their hearts were filled with memories, their bodies filled with hurt. They would sit around the campfire.
Hi, thank you for listening. My name is Ron Phillips, and I'm the owner and operations manager of Talk America Radio. It is with great pride that I offer you these two 24/7 streams of some of the finest talk radio programming in the country, but I need your support. Talk America Radio is a listener-supported network. That means we need your help to continue to offer the quality programming you're hearing right now. Please visit talkamericaradio.us and click the Support Us button. You can contribute monthly or send us a one-time amount. We'll put it to good use continuing to share the American voice. Thank you.
This is Denise Simon, host of the Denise Simon Experience. When I'm not debating with Donna Fiducia about politics, I listen to Cowboy Logic Radio. Why, you ask? Because outside of my blog, founderscode.com, and my own radio show, the Denise Simon Experience, Cowboy Logic is by far the most entertaining and informative radio show on planet Earth. Plus, Don makes me feel guilty if I don't listen to his radio show every week.
Hi, it's Mark Walters from Armed American Radio. You know, for nearly a decade, I've been educating, informing, and entertaining responsibly armed Americans. And during that time together, we've shared some ups and downs, haven't we? Trump's election saved our Supreme Court and no doubt the future of our gun rights for now. But now is not the time to lay down. The enemies of freedom are well-funded and more determined than ever. To keep up with the state of your gun rights, make sure to tune in to Armed American Radio right here on Talk America Radio, the new dominant voice in conservative talk radio.
KTA Digital Dallas. Talk America Radio. Simulcasting on WDDQ. Talk 92.1 Adel, Valdosta, Georgia. And WJHC. Talk 107.5 Jasper, Florida.
Hey, everybody, they're back on again.
Cowboys didn't dance, didn't wear designer shirts when their hearts were filled with memories, their bodies filled with hurt. They would sit around the campfire and exchange a piercing glares. Back when the West was really wild, cowboys didn't dance.
Welcome back to Cowboy Logic Radio.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Don NEUEN. I'd like to be the first to welcome you back to this riveting episode of Cowboy Logic Radio as we go into the home stretch with the queen of almost everything. And I do mean one CLARE LOPEZ. Back to you, Donna.
Yes.
Wasn't that subdued and professional sounding?
It was, which is really odd for you, but that's because
Claire's rolling her eyes at the other end of this conversation. I know you're doing it, Claire. You're going, what a mental midget, but I'm going to play along because I like him.
Claire is enjoying every minute of this.
That's because we have to have some comic relief once in a while. It's just scary.
Yeah, we get people really like you and Valerie and Peter Vincent Pry and Denise Simon and Cowan. Well, Cowan messes around with us. We have a lot of fun with him. But, you know, the bottom line, ladies and gentlemen, this is scary stuff. And it's scary not because you watch a movie and then you get scared because the movie made you scary, or you're not being afraid because of the movie. This is real, and we are overdue for a solar. And we do have nutcases that are trying to figure out ways to detonate an EMP above the United States by 70,000 feet. This is real, and nobody in the federal government is making any progress on doing something as simple as what they have been tasked with, right, Claire? And that is to protect the American people.
That's number one, period. Case closed.
It should be, of course. It's just so hard to understand why an expense like Don laid out in the last segment there, which is in the billions, but compared to the end of America as we know it, a nation-ending catastrophe, as Frank Gaffney wrote in a recent op-ed piece up online at the Center for SecurityPolicy.org, compared to that, you just have to say, well, why don't you just do it? The comparison of the catastrophe that awaits against the amount of money that would protect us against it, it just doesn't make sense. They don't do it.
And nothing else matters after that. I mean, just think of what it will do to the economy, not just obviously killing the United States. The whole world would be really thrust into the dark ages. So I just don't understand why we let these rogue nations like North Korea and Iran even have any say. But again, the solar flare is imminent. I mean, what is it normally happens every 130 years or so? We're overdue.
Well, as we were talking about that initial event when the British scientist named Carrington figured out what this was, a solar flare that hit the United States in that year of 1859 and took down our telegraph system at the time, our communication system. He also then realized, and scientists since then have realized, that the sun sends off these flares, literally all the time in all directions into the enormity of space. But the ones that we can calculate would hit the United States, smack on, he figured, and scientists figure, come on a cycle of about 150 years, 150. So, do the math from 1859. If that, number is accurate, 150-year cycle from the sun, we're overdue. And still, that doesn't move people. It doesn't move Congress. It hasn't gotten our grid protected.
Well, and they're listening to the electric company lobbyists, too. And that's a big problem.
Exactly.
And now there are 3 grids: Texas, East, and West, right? There's an Eastern grid, a Western grid, and Texas. I would venture to say Texas probably is moving to shield itself. I wouldn't be surprised if they do something. But the point is, Claire Lopez, you had also said this $2 billion equates to what, 50 cents more a month for everybody's electric bill?
It's a minute amount of money that no one would ever even notice in their electric bill on an annual basis, prorated out. It just, words fail. It boggles the mind. Why wouldn't you do this? Why wouldn't Congress mandate this? Never mind the power industry. If they're too, worried about the hassle and the cost and whatever, it needs to be mandated. This needs to be a legal mandate, a requirement. This is the defense of the nation as we know it.
With the new blood we have in the White House, at least for hopefully the next 8 years with Donald Trump, do you think there might be some movement? Because it almost seems like he's kicking both the left and the right in the backside to try to get something done, because I think he's frustrated at this point. Is there any movement at all that we're seeing, or the fact that we've got this lunatic in North Korea actually coming right out and saying, I'm going to hit you with an EMP, which made the Wall Street Journal at least finally print this story?
Right. Well, so the Wall Street Journal, yes, as you said, just really about a week ago on September the 3rd, printed a story. Headline is Electromagnetic Pulse, North Korea's latest threat against the U.S. And in the article, it notes that North Korea's state news agency actually made a reference to an EMP and the threat that they were making against the United States with an EMP. Now, we know that North Korea has ballistic missiles that can reach the United States. We know that North Korea has nuclear bombs, and now with a test of a week ago, this Sunday, about a week ago now as we're speaking, probably an H-bomb or thermonuclear bomb, hydrogen bomb, much more powerful bomb that, by the way, as Peter Pry explained to me, is a kind of a dial-a-yield sort of a bomb, which could be dialed way up to a huge explosion, a nuclear explosion meant to be detonated at ground level, 100 or more kilotons, or dialed back to a much smaller kiloton rate of, 10 or fewer kilotons, which would be the ideal size for an EMP, which does not do its damage on the ground, but rather, as we've set up in the atmosphere, sending down these gamma rays. So North Korea has the missiles, it has the bombs, and now it explicitly allows its news agency to make the threat that they're thinking about this. They're thinking about using this. And again, we mentioned this earlier talking together. Whatever North Korea has, Iran either has it or soon will. Mm-hmm. So you've got both of these. Unstable regime, unstable ruler, Kim Jong-un in Pyongyang in North Korea, and a millennialist regime in Tehran, led by mullahs and military whose eschatological beliefs hold that the maximum chaos and strife on earth will bring back their messianic figure of the 12th Imam. So, as we did mention earlier, the concept of MAD, mutual assured destruction, that worked during the time of the Cold War when the United States, a nuclear power, was faced off against the equally nuclear-armed Russia, Soviet Union, that's not something you can rely on with regimes like these and leaderships like the ones they have.
Yeah. Claire, I did some quick math. And earlier we were talking about the fact that at a basic bare bones protection level, the price tag on that to protect the grid would be $2 billion. And at military spec, $20 billion. And these are numbers coming from Dr. Peter Vincent-Pry, ladies and gentlemen. Quick math on that. $20 billion. If the federal government were to invest $60 per man, woman, and child in the United States, based on the fact that we've got about 330 million people in the United States, an investment of $60 is all this would cost.
Yeah.
I mean, per customer, per electric consumer customer, annual.
Yeah.
Total cost.
No,
that would be in their lifetime. Or just
I'm talking about if you take $20 billion and divide it by 330 million people, it's an investment of $60 and it's paid for.
Yeah.
Oh, total. I see what you're saying. Yes. Yeah.
I mean, this is the biggest no-brainer in the history of the world as far as I'm concerned. It's the greatest threat that we're facing as American people. And the federal government is stalling this, and they're being persuaded largely due to electric company lobbyists. But this is national defense. This is what the federal government is charged to do,
which they don't. All right, and here's the other thing, Claire. You mentioned the H-bomb that they just did underground in North Korea. I had heard it's much more powerful than the one we dropped on Hiroshima or Nagasaki. It caused a 6.0 earthquake in sections of China and Russia. And Iran, as you just said, wants this to destroy the West so they can have their 12th Imam come or whatever. Let's now, if we can, transition into your work with, talk a little bit about, right off the bat, Patrice Lumumba University, the way the KGB pretty much has educated the Ayatollahs.
Well, not just educated, but recruited. And so that university, which has more recently changed its name to Friendship University, but back then called Patrice Lumumba University in Moscow, is a place where the Soviets would often invite students from around the Third World, Africa, Asia, Latin America, Middle East, on full-ride scholarships to study and get their degrees. But, of course, it was a trolling ground for the KGB, the intelligence service of the Soviet Union, of Russia. And there is a website and a book that your listeners should take a look at, and it's called Comrade Ayatollah. Now, a good part of the website is in Farsi, but there's also enough English there for you to get the idea. And the book by the same name, unfortunately, is still awaiting enough funding to be translated from Farsi to English. But it tells the same story as you would see at the website, and that is about how the KGB recruited from among students who attended Patrice Lumumba University. Well, guess who is a graduate of Patrice Lumumba University? None other than today's Supreme Leader of Iran, the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. So you wonder about the close relationship between Russia and Iran, and you get a little bit of an idea of where that might have started. It's not just the Supreme Leader. Others in the top leadership of Iran also attended there. So
this is just unbelievable how this is so obvious, and this government is just doing nothing. Then you also have uranium.
Neither is the media.
Well, it's true, because we're worrying about the Russia scenario, which is non-existent, except when it comes to maybe Uranium One and the Clinton Foundation and sending our uranium, 20% of it, to Russia, not to mention, as we talked about before, the $150 billion that Obama gave to Iran. I don't care if it was their money to begin with. They're a rogue nation. It should never have been sent back. This is suicide. I think it's national suicide at this point, Claire Lopez.
Oh, I agree. It's absolutely nuts. You cannot imagine why anybody, well, maybe you can have some ideas, the previous administration would do something like that. But it has greatly enabled the Iranian regime to spend more money on its military, more money on its WMD. And when I say WMD, weapons of mass destruction, I mean not just the nukes and the ballistic missiles, which I consider to be a joint venture, really, between Iran and North Korea, but also other WMD, like a super advanced, very scary biological weapons and chemical weapons program, which they also work on together, by the way, with Syria. So the North Koreans, the Iranians, the Syrians working in Syria. Remember, the Israelis are alleged, thought to have just conducted a strike against one of those facilities in Syria, belonging to the Syrian Scientific Studies and Research Center outside of Damascus, where this cabal of rogue nations, North Korea, Iran, Syrians, probably Russians too, are working on biological warfare agents and chemical weapons like sarin. But they're all in this together, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, the news is tightening.
The Chinese and the Russians enabled North Korea's programs, missiles and nuclear. They also helped with Iran. So did Pakistan.
Oh yeah, Pakistan's in there.
That's another one.
That's the big fifth wheel here. Claire, do you guys believe, because when I first heard about this alleged Israeli bombing raid that took place on this chemical site, first thing that I thought was, oh man, this is gonna be the big problem this week. I'm surprised nothing has come from this.
Not a peep, or at least hardly a peep, I should say. It seems to me a bit similar to a couple of previous raids that the Israelis are thought to have conducted. One in 81 against Saddam Hussein's Osirak reactors actually did bring down on their heads a lot of condemnation. But about 10 years later, in 1990, when the coalition was toppling Saddam Hussein, we were all pretty darn glad the Israelis had done what they did. And then again in September of 2007, the Israeli Air Force bombed a construction site for a nuclear reactor in the Deir ez-Zor area of Syria. By the way, that is the place they're fighting over right now with the Islamic State. That nuclear reactor would have been there had the Israelis not taken it out in 2007. And in that case, there was not much of an outcry. The Arab neighbors around Syria, around Iran, were not all that thrilled that the North Koreans and the Iranians were helping the Syrians to build a nuclear reactor there. So we're kind of glad that facility is not there now. But it's gotten way past a single facility. Whether it be the SSRC in Syria, that's the Scientific Studies and Research Center. It's much more than that now. There are in Iran dozens and dozens of sites, and many of them deeply buried, just like in North Korea, deeply buried sites where R&D goes on, where warhead work goes on, where finished missiles and finished warheads are kept. North Korea and Iran similar. North Koreans have helped the Iranians to dig their tunnels and bunkers under mountains because both countries are mountainous, and the geography lends itself to burying things underground like that. So we're faced with a much bigger problem now than had we acted earlier when it was more manageable. For example, in 2002, when the Iranian Democratic Opposition Group, the National Council of Resistance of Iran, first blew the lid off of Iran's up-till-then clandestine nuclear weapons program, which had been going on since the late 1980s, 14 years or so. At that time, there were many fewer facilities. Revealed at that time were places like Natanz, the enrichment site, Isfahan, the conversion site, and other places. Had we acted then, we would have faced a far less complex problem than today, when so much of the program has now been buried underground, deeply underground.
And I find that that's pretty much the case when you've got a leader of a rogue nation, also like North Korea and Iran for that matter, leaders basically calling for the destruction of the West. I mean, how many times do we have to, sit here and take this? Again, it's like the boy who cried wolf. Oh, don't worry about it. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. And, I mean, what happens when it strikes, it could be too late, as we've been talking about with the EMP. We're talking with CLARE Lopez, Vice President for Research and Analysis at the Center for Security Policy. You can find all their information at centerforsecuritypolicy.org or securefreedom.org. And, Claire, you've written so much stuff about Sharia as well. Let's look at what's happening here in the United States. We have no-go zones up in sections of Dearbornistan, Michigan, as it's called. But you have written a paper, Sharia, the Threat to America. Tell us a little bit about what's going on there, and we only have a few minutes left, unfortunately. And is there any hope that Donald Trump might actually outlaw the Muslim Brotherhood?
Well, there are places in the United States which I might call incipient or developing no-go zones. And among them, just as you say, Dearborn, Michigan might be counted, places within Minneapolis, Minnesota, Chicago, Illinois, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, if you can imagine, Phoenix, Arizona. These are places where enclaves of Muslim residents are grouped around various mosques and Islamic centers, and where they are building literally parallel societies in which all the services, all of the activity of the community is under Sharia, under Islamic law, and little girls, and we can talk about this, little girls growing up facing the threat in America of female genital mutilation, FGM, as we now know from the Michigan case, may never have the chance to see a non-Muslim nurse, doctor, social worker as they grow up. So those places are developing in the United States. The problem is that you're talking about places in the United States, in American states, that are effectively seceded from the writ of law of the Constitution or of that state or municipality, and that's a very dangerous situation, which, if left to proceed as they will, unchecked, you will get to something like what goes on now in the Parisian banlieue, the suburbs of Paris, or Lyon, or Marseille, or any of the other cities in France, the Molenbeek area of Brussels in Belgium, Malmo in Sweden, of all places, Sweden, where it's truly no-go zones, and police and other emergency personnel, firefighters, actually get attacked if they try to go in there. Those places have truly seceded from the law, the writ of law of those countries. We can't let that happen here.
Absolutely not. Any chance the Muslim Brotherhood would be outlawed by the Trump administration, and that might start the House of Cards falling in that department?
Well, it doesn't look like it right now. It seems to be not an issue being discussed at the moment. And my point about the Muslim Brotherhood has always been we really should begin to just stop thinking about terrorism, plural, period. This isn't about terrorism. That's bad enough. The security services have to deal with that for sure, and our local law enforcement too. But with the Muslim Brotherhood, the threat is not terrorism. They don't do terrorism. They do subversion. Mm-hmm. And that's way more dangerous because it's insidious, because it's not so visible, because it's under the radar, because they wear nice suits and they trim their beards and they walk the halls of Congress. That's not terrorism. That's subversion.
No, they walked the halls of the White House on numerous occasions during the Obama administration, too.
Well, and if I'm not mistaken, didn't the KGB somewhat create the Muslim Brotherhood?
Well, I think I probably would not put it that way, no. The Muslim Brotherhood was founded by a set of students in Egypt, in Cairo, Egypt, led by Hassan al-Banna at the University of Cairo in 1928. And they formed the Muslim Brotherhood because the Islamic Caliphate, the last caliphate, had been literally abolished 4 years previously in 1924 by Kemal Ataturk, the leader, the ruler of what was left of Turkey after World War I, broke apart the Ottoman Empire. Hassan al-Banna and his fellow students wanted to reestablish the caliphate globally under rule of Islamic law. Those objectives to this day remain the objectives of the Muslim Brotherhood. And, of course, they're the objectives of every Muslim, caliphate and Sharia. It's very simple. I mean, that's all they want, caliphate and Sharia globally, but those are the objectives of the Brotherhood. But what they do is promote those objectives through guile and stealth and what we call the civilization jihad, through dawah, which means, in a word, subversion.
I love being corrected by Claire Lopez. I think it's hot, Claire.
But
I got to be honest with you.
Claire, you make it so easily understood, and that's why we love having you on the show, but unfortunately we're out of time. Claire Lopez, Vice President for Research and Analysis at the Center for Security Policy. Find all of this stuff, especially the Civilization Jihad writings, at the centerforsecuritypolicy.org or securefreedom.org. And of course, on our Talk America radio network, you can hear Frank Gaffney's show every night because it's so important for the what's going on, the Center for Security Policy and the work that they do. And Claire Lopez, as usual, thank you so much for joining us here. Everybody, read up on electromagnetic pulses. Get yourself educated. That's a better way to say it.
And thank you both, Don and Donna, so much for everything you do supporting the center. And
thank you, Claire. We sure do love you and the work that you do. Thank you.
We try. Claire Lopez, everyone. Hey, I always end with a quote. This one comes from Harry Truman. And given the fact that Barack Obama has just bought a $15 million lot among all of his multi-million-dollar homes he has, that lot in Martha's Vineyard, the quote from Harry Truman is, "You can't get rich in politics unless you're a crook." Have a great week, everyone. I'm Donna Fiducia, along with Don Neuen. Find us at cowboylogic.us. We'll see you next Tuesday, 9 p.m. Eastern Time. And in the meantime, God bless America.
Cowboys didn't dance, didn't wear designer shirts. Their hearts were filled with memories, their bodies filled with hurt. They would sit around the campfire and exchange a piercing glance. Back when the West was really wild, cowboys didn't dance. When cowboys didn't dance, didn't wear designer shirts. When their hearts were filled with memories, their bodies filled with hurt. They would sit around the campfire and exchange a piercing glance. Back when the West was really wild, cowboys didn't dance.
Check us out on the web at cowboylogic.us.